In 1974, a man named Sam Londe was diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus. His doctors told him he had months to live. He declined exactly as predicted and died right on schedule. When they performed the autopsy, they found something that shook the entire medical team. The cancer was barely there, a few small tumors, nothing that should have killed him. Sam Londe did not die from cancer. He died from a diagnosis. This is not a story about medical error. It is not a story about misdiagnosis. It is a story about something far stranger, the documented, measurable, repeatable ability of words to alter human biology at the cellular level. And once you understand the mechanism behind what happened to Sam Londe, you will never hear a doctor speak the same way again. The placebo effect you already know. You take a sugar pill, you are told it will help, and sometimes it does. Your brain expects relief, and your body delivers it. Real, measurable, physiological relief from a pill that contains absolutely nothing. Science has known about this for decades. It is taught in every medical school on Earth. But there is another side to this coin that medicine has been far quieter about. Researchers call it the nocebo effect. Nocebo comes from the Latin. Placebo means I shall please. Nocebo means I shall harm. And it does exactly that. The first person to study this seriously was a physician named Walter Kennedy. In 1961, he noticed something unusual in clinical drug trials. Patients in the control group, the ones receiving the inactive placebo pill, were reporting side effects. Real ones: nausea, headaches, fatigue, dizziness. Side effects listed in the trial's documentation as possible consequences of the actual drug. These patients had not taken the drug. They had taken nothing. But they had been told what might happen, and their bodies made it happen anyway. Kennedy published his findings and named the phenomenon. For the next 2 decades, almost nobody paid attention. The placebo effect was useful, marketable, optimistic. The nocebo effect was its opposite, and medicine had very little interest in sitting with what it implied. Then the data started piling up in ways that became impossible to ignore. In the 1990s, a cardiologist named Pradyuman Shah was tracking outcomes in patients with heart disease. He noticed a pattern that made no clinical sense. Patients who had been told their condition was serious were dying faster than patients with objectively worse heart disease who had not been given that framing. The expectation of decline was accelerating the decline, not causing it entirely, accelerating it measurably, statistically. Around the same time, a research team in Italy began running what became one of the most cited nocebo studies in medical history. They recruited patients with irritable bowel syndrome and divided them into groups. One group was told the injection they were about to receive sometimes caused a temporary increase in pain and intestinal cramping. The other group was told nothing. Same injection, same patients, same bodies. The group that had been warned experienced significantly more pain. Their intestinal activity spiked. Their reported discomfort was nearly double. The warning had not prepared them for pain. It had created it. Here is what is actually happening under the surface. Your nervous system is not a passive recorder of what happens to your body. It is a prediction engine. Constantly, beneath the level of your awareness, it is running a model of what is about to happen next and preparing your body accordingly. When you expect cold, your blood vessels begin to constrict before the cold arrives. When you expect pain, your pain sensitivity increases before anything touches you. This is not weakness or suggestibility. This is your brain doing its job efficiently, getting ahead of the curve, preparing the body for what it has been told to expect. The problem is that this system cannot distinguish between a threat that is coming and a threat that someone simply told you was coming. When a doctor says you may experience nausea, your brain files that under incoming threat and starts preparing a nausea response. Not in every patient, not every time, but in a statistically significant percentage of people, in study after study, across decades of replicated research, the warning becomes the symptom. But here is where it gets genuinely strange. In 2007, a young man in the American South enrolled in a clinical drug trial for antidepressants. He was assigned to the placebo group without knowing it. Several months in, he had a fight with his girlfriend. In a moment of desperation, he swallowed his entire bottle of pills, 29 tablets. He collapsed. His blood pressure dropped. His pulse was faint. He arrived at the emergency room convinced he was dying, and by every external measure he appeared to be. The doctors treated him aggressively for overdose. Hours later, another physician from the trial arrived and told him the truth. The pills were sugar. He had taken 29 tablets of nothing. Within 15 minutes of hearing that, his blood pressure normalized, his pulse steadied, he recovered completely. What the pills could not do, the belief in the pills had done. And then what another person's words undid, in minutes without any medical intervention at all. This case appeared in a 2012 paper in the journal General Hospital Psychiatry. It is one of the most extreme documented examples of nocebo response on record. But it is not an outlier in principle. It is an extreme point on a spectrum that every human being sits somewhere on. Fabrizio Benedetti is a neuroscientist at the University of Turin who has spent 30 years mapping exactly what happens in the brain and body during nocebo responses. What he found is this. When a patient expects pain or illness, the brain releases a class of molecules called cholecystokinin. CCK actively amplifies pain signals. It dials up the sensitivity of your nociceptors, the nerve endings that register damage. Your brain doesn't just believe you are in pain, it rewires the circuitry to make pain more available. The nocebo effect is not psychological in the soft, dismissive sense of that word. It is neurochemical, it is structural, it is happening in your tissue. Benedetti also found that the nocebo response intensifies with trust. The more a patient trusts the person delivering the negative expectation, the stronger the physiological response, which means the effect is worst precisely where you are most vulnerable, in a hospital room, with a specialist, with someone holding your test results and your future in the same conversation.
Nobody is suggesting doctors should stop telling patients the truth. That is not where this goes. But what researchers like Benedetti and teams at Harvard's program in placebo studies have begun arguing is that how a doctor speaks matters as much as what a doctor does. The framing of a prognosis, the tone of a warning, the specific words chosen to describe a risk. These are not soft considerations sitting at the edge of real medicine. They are clinical variables with measurable biological outcomes. Words are a drug. They have a dosage. They have side effects. And right now, most doctors are not trained to use them that way. Go back to Sam Londe for a moment. His physician, Clifton Meter, spent years after Sam's death writing about what he had witnessed. He coined the term hex death to describe cases where patients die, not from...
Thanks for watching.